If you don't own at least one of these 3 affordable classics, what have you been doing? Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome to something a bit different today, more an opinion piece than an out-and-out review. Now every year I compile my annual State of the Collection video where I go through every single watch that I've got in the house that is legitimately part of my collection. And as I was running through the various categories last week, 3 watches stood out above all of the others. And I thought to myself, I reckon 99% of the people watching this video will own at least one of the 3 watches. And when you put them all together, they actually form a pretty decent 3-piece affordable collection. So I thought I would formalise my thoughts in this video. Of course, I want to hear from you. I want to hear how many of these 3 watches you have in your current collection or have owned in the past. Do you agree that they have all become affordable collectors' rites of passage in their own way? Or would you pick 3 different watches? Leave me a comment, I'm looking forward to reading them. But for now, I guess I better tell you what the 3 watches are, hadn't I? The first one is a big brand Japanese dive watch that if you got into watches more than 4 years ago, you're pretty much guaranteed to have owned. It is, of course, the Seiko SKX. Indeed, it was almost a running joke how much SKX related content all of us YouTubers were putting out at the point up until it was discontinued. Personally, I bought them, I modded them, I sold them, I pulled them apart, I put them back together again, and I bawled my eyes out the day that Seiko discontinued it and it was finally laid to rest in my back garden. Half of the people making watch content had an existential crisis that month because we simply did not know what we were going to do for content without the SKX. But you know what? It was a really good watch. 200 meters proper ISO certified water resistant dive watch with a very basic movement but very reliable movement by Seiko of course, and they were priced at under $200. The big one still fitted the majority of wrists well because it had a compact lug to lug and it had Seiko's lovely smooth high polished case finish, so it was really comfortable on wrist. The jingly jangly Jubilee was a damn sight better than the stiff as a board rubber strap, in my opinion anyway, and if the big one was too big, they made a small one. Plus, if you got bored with the way your SKX looked, there were almost as many people trying to sell you mod parts for the Seiko as there were people trying to sell you the Seiko in the first place. It truly was the Honda Civic of dive watches. Everyone's had one at one point, it was a great place to start, and the mod scene around them was enormous. And what did Seiko replace it with? Well, something that looked quite similar, but it wasn't quite the same, was it? We got the better movement that we all wanted, but at the cost of ISO certification and some of the charm therefore. Prices shot up when they were discontinued, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that you spend $1,000 on one of these. There are just so many of them made. They're never going to be worth that much. They're never going to be rare or special in that sense anyway. But if you can find one for reasonable money second hand in good shape, it still makes a perfectly valid choice today, and it has now acquired the status of a modern classic. Moving on from a watch that was discontinued 4 years ago to a watch that didn't even exist 4 years ago. And yeah, I bet that most people watching this video have picked up one of these. This time it's from a big Swiss brand, part of the Swatch Group, and I reckon it's made more than a few Swiss bankers even richer than they were a few years ago thanks to ridiculous sales numbers. It's the watch that brought the Gerald Genta look to the masses. It is of course the Tissot PRX. Why has the Tissot PRX been so successful? Well, for exactly that reason. Gerald Genta's designs are still highly regarded, even now some 50 years after most of them were created, and frankly, 50 years after most of them were in fashion. But what's old is new again, fashion runs in cycles, and the 70s integrated bracelet look is having a real moment at the moment. Now, Genta didn't design the original PRX from the mid-1970s, but Tissot definitely copied his homework at the time. So they can now proudly say that no, they're not copying one of his designs, they are merely reissuing one of their own designs. And Tissot have played a blinder in terms of pricing and offerings on the PRX. First, they offered quartz at a reasonable price. I think they were around $400 US, but could often be picked up for a lot less than that on the grey market, as you can see. Then they introduced an automatic, same watch, admittedly twice the price for the upgraded movement. Then they introduced a smaller version in quartz, then they introduced a smaller version automatic, then they started adding more and more colours, including gold. In some cases, literally gold. They added a gold bezel and made the PRX an entry-level luxury watch as a consequence. Then they added a drop-dead gorgeous but considerably larger chronograph, which acted as a halo model and then reinvigorated the range. And then finally they added the PRX that nobody asked for. A digital version, which looks rather odd but also looks rather a lot like Casio's very first digital watch, the Casiotron, oddly enough from the 1970s. Now, if you didn't find something in amongst that lot that you like, then frankly, you're just being a bit picky. But judging by the sheer volume of PRX that I see on Instagram and Facebook these days, I think a lot of you did find something that you like, and indeed, you bought it. And in spite of getting most of the PRX that I have reviewed on loan, I couldn't resist buying one for myself either. I paid $450 Aussie dollars, so around 300 US dollars, for a quartz version a couple of years ago, and it has done just what quartz always does. It has ticked away happily, reliably, and accurately ever since. I think perhaps we have now reached peak PRX and we're on our way down the other side. I'm not sure what Tissot can do to encourage more of us to buy more of them. Maybe if they release the in-between size, the 37.5mm, we would see another rush to purchase. But I think this model has already done its job. It has sold a huge number of units and has found a way into the watch boxes of a huge number of collectors. So, 2 out of 2 for me then. How are you getting on? Watch number 3, which rounds out our collection of must-have affordable watches today, is by another big Japanese brand. It's a watch that I must have included in 10 or 12 different videos by now, recommending different versions to you. I even referred to it as the world's best value watch, an accolade that I still happily pin on this one's chests, if watches had chests. It's a Casio, but it isn't the F91W, it's the AE1200, aka the Casio Royale. When I started covering this watch, they were 15 US dollars or less. Nowadays, you're still only looking at the low 20s, and they pack a hell of a punch for really not much money. 100 meters of water resistance, a cracking LED backlight, world time functionality, a stopwatch, a countdown timer, multiple alarms, and a 10-year battery life, all for less than $25. Like I said at the very beginning of the video, if you haven't bought one of these, what have you been doing in this hobby up until this point? You should have bought one of these by now, you really should. And don't think that because it's not a G-Shock it can't take a beating, because it can. Digital modules are not nearly as sensitive to knocks and scrapes as mechanical movements can be, and that acrylic crystal can be repolished so that scratches disappear. Okay, I admit it's not the most attractive of watches, the world map is slightly silly, and there is a considerable of dial real estate that is rather wasted as a consequence. But it's actually a good size for fully grown adult human beings, it doesn't weigh an awful lot so it's really comfortable, and just like the SKX, if you get bored, you can modify it. Companies now offer replacement leather bands as well as stainless steel cases with sapphire crystals, which are a huge upgrade over the original resin and acrylic combination that you get out of the box. Modifications do of course add considerably to the expense, but when the watch is under $25 in the first place, you're still only looking at $150 after the mods, so it's still the cheapest watch in today's video. I reckon Casio have sold hundreds of thousands of these to people just like you and me who want an affordable, reliable, knockabout digital watch that's always there for us long after our mechanicals have run out of juice. So that's another box that I have ticked then myself, maybe 7 or 8 times, but I have given a few of them away. So it's okay for me to still have 3, isn't it? So there you have it. What did you think of my selection? The SKX was so ubiquitous a few years ago, I reckon most people will have owned at least one of them. And the PRX is currently so ubiquitous, again, I think most people will have owned at least one of them as well. And the AE1200 is such an affordable classic, I reckon it's a good chance you probably bought one of them over the years too. And when you look at the 3 of them in combination, what do you think of what is essentially a budget collection, dive watch, sports watch, beater watch, combined less than 500 US dollars? I love this hobby and I love the affordable end of this hobby. I love watches just like these three. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Why don't you now watch my top 5 hot affordable watches of the last 5 years video, or the one of me in a wig crying about the death of the SKX. I'll see you all again in the next one.